Good, thank you. Good afternoon. You see, you've been trained to give a healthy response to that. And I like also HBS's commitment to process improvement, that this is now there, this timer has moved forward. Thank you very much for that. So I'm going to talk about ambidexterity, by which I don't mean we're going to do some sort of physical contortions to figure out how we can juggle or something of that nature. But ambidexterity is something that we think of, and I should say we, if you were here yesterday, you would have heard my colleague Mike Tushman, who obviously works here at the Harvard Business School, but Change Logic is his firm as well. And by ambidexterity, we kind of think of this as being at the intersection of innovation and change. And it's an approach to working with firms to help them manage, incumbent firms, how they can make successful transformations at points of disruption, how they can sort of beat the odds, if you will, and avoid the fate of firms that we know have suffered, like Nokia or Blockbuster or whomever. So let's start by talking about one of the things that always hovers over us as we talk about digital transformation and change, which is the sort of the mythology of startups. And this is, I think, whenever you get into talking about digital, you start with Uber or Lyft, as Kareem did earlier. And they obviously have set the pace in terms of thinking about new business models, applications of different technologies, and so on. But my concern is more with the incumbents, with the established firms. And I think that what happens with the startup mythology, the hallowed ground here of Los Altos and the Apple garage, or I said it the American way. I usually say garage. I actually managed to pre-correct myself. Amazing. The garage. That this is somehow just the right way to do it. There's something powerful. I spend a lot of my time with media firms and with technology firms, and they love to be like Google. The thing is that if you're an assisting firm, you've got to do a little bit more than that. It's all very well to be applying the processes of lean startup. Let's pause for a moment, the process. So large companies figure out how to adopt a process from startups, which is kind of contradictory of itself. But what they've got to do as large firms is do explore and exploit simultaneously. Because you've got to be as concerned for your core business, your established franchise, and the revenues and the profits and the margins and everything, and you've got to be concerned with how you explore into the future. Neither of these two disciplines are of themselves unknown. It's the tension that doing them together that is really what becomes a challenge and what many firms struggle to do. And this is the reality. It's kind of, how do you be consistently inconsistent? Focus in two directions. One direction, discipline, order, don't screw up, drive the profit. And the other one, play, experiment, learn. Right? And hold that within the same organizational architecture, the same leadership architecture as the other. So there are firms that I think have done this successfully and can teach us some important lessons. And there were some people from IBM. I used to be an IBMer. It's where I got started on this, as IBM set up its emerging business opportunities from about 2000 onwards and created some billion-dollar businesses, really applying this, very deliberately applying this notion of ambidexterity. I think you had Julie Larson-Green here yesterday, and Julie there running Microsoft Office Desktop, while with a peer simultaneously, Rajesh Jha, then a peer, running Microsoft on the cloud. Two different ways of doing the same thing, two peers, two structurally separate organizations, each with a different mission, all under a single leader. Another example, we'll click up, might be NVIDIA, right? This is a firm that has made a tremendous leap, still doing graphic processing for computers, while at the same time developing this bold vision of how it can support autonomous driving and deep learning by being the leader in visual computing. Again, playing two games simultaneously as it does so. And my personal favorite of Elsevier, I didn't know Doruk would be here, Elsevier figuring out how to continue to be the world's largest publisher of scientific journal content and develop workflow solutions to enable scientific discovery. And also Mendeley, a scientific community, and to build sort of collaborative science models. So there are models that are successful that we've seen in a bunch of different firms. But the reality is a lot of folks get stuck. Yeah? And they get stuck for some of the reasons that fellow speakers have already described, primarily to do with the lessons of the past, right? And I think it was Bharat who gave the example with humility of saying that in HBX you even thought, hey, in a content business, it's all about content and platform, and you caught yourself. And that's what happens in many established firms. They get trapped in the thinking of old models, and that is often what leads to the kind of challenges that they face. So what do you do about this? Well, what we found through Michael's research and our application of this in a bunch of different firms, is there's really sort of 6 different capabilities for ambidexterity which you're looking to develop, and I'm going to just buzz through them very quickly. And my hope is in our breakout we'll be able to unpack these a little bit more and get your experience as to how you see some of these problems, and I hope to learn from you if possible. So the first set are really to do with your sort of formal processes of innovation. You've got to discover, you've got to ideate, if you will, in new areas. You've then got to experiment and incubate new business, and then you've got to scale them, be that in a network sense or in a traditional sense. Right? And most of our attention gets focused on the ideation dimension. And this is, I think, where an incumbent firm's obsession with the startup myth creates a real potential drag. Right? Because really the tougher part is not the transition from ideating to experimenting, it's actually the next transition. How do I figure out when I've got something that looks like it's a hot prospect, how do I manage the organizational reality of shifting people and money towards the new thing when actually that's also taking money away from a core which is established and successful? And that is substantially a human issue, not only a logical business issue, if you will. So there are these sort of formal innovation capabilities which we can talk about. But most of the action in ambidexterity actually sits in the next set of parallel capabilities. Firstly, have you got an ambition that is equal to the opportunity that you're seeking to explore? Amusingly, in the program, my session has my title, and then it says I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence. By now you figured out that I'm not. But it called to mind a client that I'm working with where it's an artificial intelligence unit of a large European bank. And the woman who runs it has been told, just find the least disruptive application of AI, please. Right? Their ambition is not equal, right, to the scale of the opportunity. Right? So setting this ambition at a level that actually permits the right kind of exploration is pretty important. So too is this notion of learning. And it couples very tightly with experimentation. And what we've learned is that really this whole notion of experimentation is a strongly cultural attribute of a firm, that many firms that have become successful have not learned to test their hypotheses about business with data and then to iterate based on those data. Right? What they tend to do is say, hey, if the opportunity is big enough, let's go spend a lot of money on it. Right? It's a very different philosophy, because I'm a serious businessman, I'm going to spend money on this. As opposed to, hey, I want to spend little bits of money and I want to learn. And so most of the stories of failed innovation that we find ourselves, failed ambidexterity that we find ourselves going into, tends to be where there is this gap in terms of the ability to learn. And that gap is represented in the social system, right, with a bunch of leaders who have built their careers around the assumptions and practices of the past business model. And so unless you are figuring out how to attack the social system simultaneously with the innovation, then you're going to find we see our firms struggle to be able to deal with that. So there are a bunch of ways to do that, which I hope, again, we'll explore in the breakout. So innovation and change simultaneously is really what this game of ambidexterity is all about. And I hope that in the breakout what we can do is go from the high-level theory, which I've glanced over in the last 10 minutes, and dig another level down. There's a lot of very, very practical questions. How do you shift resources? How do you appoint leaders to run new businesses? Right? This turns out, because everybody's solution to that is either let's find somebody junior, right? Because they'll know how to do something we've never done before. Or better still, let's get somebody from the outside, because then if it fails, there's no consequence to the rest of us. Right? So there are many detailed questions around how you do this stuff, which would be good to dig into in the breakout. Thank you.